extent, fear and anxiety of the unknown. In such difficult times, I believe if we can offer management lessons sprinkled with a pinch of spirituality, I'm sure it would make the experience wholesome and much more meaningful for our audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we feel privileged to have with us today H.G. Gauranga Das, popularly known as Gauranga Prabhuji, to deliver a webinar on today's topic. The topic today is 5 leadership sutras in times of change. Our speaker today, H.G. Gauranga Das, is a monk and an environmentalist who holds a BTech degree from IIT Mumbai and serving in various capacities at national and global level in ISKCON organization. He is the director of the Govardhan Eco Village, a United Nations World Tourism Organization award-winning eco village community. Without taking any further time, I'll now request Gauranga Prabhuji to kindly deliver the webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Prabhuji.
For giving. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You can hear me, right? I can start?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you. So, I express my gratitude to the organizers of this webinar for giving me a chance to speak. We are especially going through very traumatic times, and leadership in these situations demands very high degree of ability to deal with uncertainty, change, and the ability to make the right decisions in the midst of these constraints. The world as we know of has sudden
Prabhuji, you've lost your voice.
Hello?
Yeah, you're back, sir, now. We had lost your connection.
Is it fine?
Yeah. We can hear you, sir.
Okay. So I was giving the example of the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where Arjuna was experiencing this dilemma when he was caught between the two armies of the Kauravas and the Pandavas. Arjuna had all the expertise and skills at his disposal. Arjuna had a track record of not having lost a single battle in his entire career. Arjuna was a gold medalist from Dronacharya's institute. Arjuna was skill personified. Arjuna was confidence personified. Arjuna was success personified. But one particular thing which Arjuna experienced was Krishna brought Arjuna's chariot right in the midst of both the armies, and then brought his chariot right in front of Dronacharya and Bhishma. And that was the beginning of how Arjuna got experienced. Arjuna started experiencing trauma just by seeing that. Arjuna was thinking that in this situation, I am trained to fight against my enemies. Arjuna was used to fight in familiar territory where there was a clear demarcation between friend and enemy. Duryodhan, Dushasan, they are enemies. That was clearly defined that was absolutely straightforward. But here was Arjuna, and he was brought right in front of Dronacharya and Bhishma Dev. And when Arjuna saw Dronacharya, suddenly his paradigm changed. That, oh, this is my teacher. Here is Bhishma. This is my grandfather. And Arjuna started thinking that as per my previous paradigm, my known paradigm, my paradigm of certainty, when I see an enemy, I take the arrow, fix it on my bow, shoot that arrow, and it pierces through the heart of the opposite person, and he gets killed. This was life as usual for Arjuna, and that is what he was used to do all the time. But on that particular day, that particular moment, what Krishna gave Arjuna exposure to was total, random, uncertain situation. Because for the first time in life, Arjuna faced a situation where he had to shoot an arrow at his own grandfather and at his own teacher from whom he has learned his entire trade. And that was the beginning of Arjuna's confusion, because Arjuna could deal with certain battles, battles which had paradigm of certainty around it, but Arjuna felt himself incapable of dealing with the paradigm of total uncertainty. And therefore, at that point, Arjuna, he expresses to Krishna various reasons why he will not fight. And then he says, Visrijya sharam chapam shoka samvigna manasa. Mind overwhelmed by grief. Arjuna, his mind filled with doubts. Arjuna knew what a fight is. Arjuna knew how to fight. But Arjuna suddenly forgot why he should fight. And then Arjuna sat down on that chariot and placed his bows and arrows. Arjuna's skills were intact, but Arjuna's will was severely affected. And today, all of you who are attending this seminar, you are not attending to hope to gain some skills from me. You are not hoping to gain any of your marketing or managerial or corporate skills from me. I come here representing a tradition which helps people strengthen their will to add and bolster their skill, so that the deadly combination of well-honed skill along with a properly defined and directed will can lead a person to success. No great thing happens without overcoming challenges. And one of the greatest challenges all of us face are we are expected to cross mountains of uncertainty. We are expected to cross the huge ocean of change and difficult situations which are unexpected. And at that time is the test not of our skill but of our will, as Arjuna experienced. And therefore Krishna fixed Arjuna's will over a period of 1 hour. He spoke 700 verses of what is popularly known as the Bhagavad Gita. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita was the book or the knowledge which was given to Arjuna to help him cope with that uncertainty. Krishna told Arjuna that yes, you have the nature of a fighter. Yes, the Swadharma or the Swabhava you have, the nature is that of a Kshatriya, of a fighter. The Swadharma, your occupation, is that of a fighter. But in spite of knowing your Swadharma and your Swabhava perfectly well, you are unable to cope up with this current situation, because the current situation of uncertainty needs you to understand and realize your Swarupa, that you actually are an unchangeable soul different from the body and circumstances. And therefore, circumstances are beyond our control, but our consciousness and will and our mental strength is within our control. So, in the last 50 years, ISKCON has been very actively distributing not just plates of prasadam, because in the last 25 days of the COVID lockdown, ISKCON in India has distributed more than 1.5 crore plates of prasadam. But along with that, food for the body, we also give the food for the soul, which is the Bhagavad Gita. And we have managed to distribute more than 50 crore copies of Bhagavad Gita over the last 50 years. And the Bhagavad Gita basically contains that wisdom which helps us control and strengthen our will so that we can deal with various changing circumstances. So today I will share with you 5 leadership sutras in times of change. The first sutra is motivation alone doesn't work on externally imposed change. So many times people give this logic. There is a change, there is a problem. Okay, we have a lockdown now, but don't worry, let's stay positive. Positive attitude is everything. And so, let us have some motivational talk. Let us have a pep talk. And let us all feel good, think good. But there is a limit to that. There are 2 types of change which are described in the Shastras. First is an internally driven change. Internally driven change is something which any of you decide in your own life. Like, for example, some of you may be deciding, let me go through a weight loss program. Although during lockdown, many people are actually expressing that they are facing the other problem of weight gain rather than weight loss. But imagine that you decide that I will go on a weight loss program. It is an internally driven change where you keep control over your intake of food. You have control over how many hours of exercise you do. You decide and calibrate how you are actually going to perform that exercise in a way that you lose X amount of calories. So it is basically your particular decision on how you want to do things. So therefore, it's an internally driven change. Any kind of habit change which you decide is internally driven. Whereas an externally driven change is something which is beyond your capacity and outside of your line of control. And how is that? For example, this current situation we are going through is an externally imposed change. January and February, there were news reports coming about a certain kind of virus which has afflicted China, Wuhan. And then many of us in India were thinking, oh, I think it's a Chinese problem. So we are dealing with it. But gradually, as we realized the magnitude of what we are dealing with, we realized that we have to wake up and make the necessary changes. And so all of us are staying at home, staying safe, and trying to maintain the social distancing so that we can ultimately maintain our life. Because the way the virus is spreading, especially in US, they have one of the best healthcare systems. They have one of the most sophisticated systems for hospital and everything. But this virus is out there to prove that in front of its power, practically all of our current efforts will fail once it has been infected. And therefore, we find that the total weight of all the viruses, the coronaviruses across the world, if you put together, it will not even come to the weight of 1 gram. But just 1 gram of virus all across the whole world put together, but it has devastated the entire world and the lifestyle as we know. So this is genuinely an externally imposed change. An externally imposed change takes away three things. It takes away our freedom, it takes away our choices, it takes away our sense of being in control of the situation. So our control, our choices, our freedom has been taken away. And what to speak of the bottom line, what to speak of all the other business plans which we had in this new financial year. So the new financial year from April 1st has begun on a historically depleted note, which no one in a proper business sense would have expected or imagined. And, you know, yes, businesses are used to dealing with externally imposed change. When the budgets come out, when policies change, when there are sudden swings in the environment in certain ways, some externally imposed change is something which all of us have to deal with. Maybe there is a merger and acquisition in the whole industry or whatever. But these are all finite changes compared to the change we are dealing with today, which is humongous, which in proportion appears to be so infinite, and which has taken all of us so suddenly that within the last 1 month, as they say, हम सबकी दुनिया बदल गई in terms of our personal lives, family lives, occupations, relationships, and most importantly, everything about the future seems to be completely covered with uncertainty. And therefore, when we face internally driven change, at that time, the leaders can always embark on improving and focusing on motivation part. Suppose there is a coach and the coach is helping you lose weight, or you have a dietitian. So the dietitian is helping you lose weight. It is you have decided to lose that weight, and now and then you feel like cheating and eating something which is not in your diet, and then you confess to your dietitian. So all the dietitian has to do is to motivate you and say that, foresee the picture of a slim you, foresee how much more energy and enthusiasm you will have, foresee what kind of social acceptance you will get. And so some kind of a pep talk and motivational talk about just seeing and envisioning the future and all can help in an internally driven change. But what do you do in an externally imposed change? In an externally imposed change, mere motivational talk will not do. We can't just be telling people, stay positive, everything is fine, it's all a matter of time, just have patience, just think positive, just be positive. No. At this point in time, people across the world, in your organizations, you may be the CEOs, the business owners, you may be an employee, you may be a CEO, CFO, whatever. But people are currently, number one, they are confused. Number two, they just don't know what's happening. And number three, they need a source of information and knowledge they can trust. And number four, they need a leader who knows what is best, and then he acts as per what is best. And therefore, people are currently looking for a leader who can actually do two things reliably. First, he can reliably interpret things. Can you hear me better now? He can reliably interpret things better, and he is able to lead them into a bright future. And therefore, right now, in externally imposed change, what we need is not just mere motivation, but in fact, if people just rely on motivation to inspire their followers, such leaders actually lose credibility in these situations. What we actually need is leaders who are good at interpreting situation accurately and communicating that to those who are dependent upon them in the best possible way. So therefore, in this situation, we can try our level best how we can help interpret situation on our own and how we can help others interpret situation also. So I'm trying to switch off the fan and see if the sound of the fan is responsible for this poor audio quality. Are things better now? Is this
Yes,
better?
it is better. It's better, sir.
Okay, fine.
It's better.
Fine, thank you. So then I'll just quote one situation from Mahabharata where Bhishma is on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. He is lying on a bed of arrows. He has been shot arrows from head to toe. And so at that point, Yudhishthir Maharaj is in great dilemma. Because for Yudhishthir Maharaj, this is an externally imposed change because he was the last person who wanted to fight a battle. In fact, Yudhishthir Maharaj tried his level best to go for a peace formula. But in spite of all of his efforts, the peace formula failed. And so Krishna forced Yudhishthir Maharaj to get into a battle. And a peace-loving, rights-loving, and dharma-loving Yudhishthir did not want a battle at all, but he was forced to go into this battle. Within 18 days, 64 crore soldiers were killed. Yudhishthir saw all around him palaces filled with women crying for, all of that losses which they experienced. 64 crore women lost their husbands, children became anath, orphans. And Yudhishthir, being the good gentleman that he was, started blaming himself that I am responsible for this entire situation. This crisis which has happened here is because of my obsession with becoming king. And in spite of the fact that Vyasdev was there, Krishna was there, all the sages were there, they were trying to convince him that no, it was due to the ruffians, Duryodhana and Dushasana, and their obsession with their ego. This battle had to happen and you are not the cause. But somehow Yudhishthir would not agree. And then finally Yudhishthir was taken by Krishna in front of Bhishma. And when Yudhishthir and Krishna and the Pandavas entered right in front of Bhishma, Bhishma was also in the midst of an externally imposed change. And within the externally imposed change, Bhishma could not move his fingers, could not move his hands, could not move his legs. The externally imposed change on Bhishma was that he was completely horizontal and all the blood in his body was almost gone and his life air was barely sticking to his body. And as per Vedic tradition, when great personalities, guests enter, you have to offer the best kind of hospitality. But the externally imposed change on Bhishma was such that he could not get up, he could not offer the traditional hospitality. In the midst of this, Bhishma processed that situation. He processed that externally imposed change. He realized that within all the limitations caused by the arrows pierced through my body, there is still one thing which I can do to express the principle of hospitality in my heart. Yes, in the ideal situation, I would have got up, walked up to Krishna, given him a throne, allowed him to sit on the throne, taken his feet, washed his feet in water, washed his feet with chandan, offered garland, offer all kinds of auspicious spices, offer him a nice feast, and make him feel royal. That is the ideal situation. That is the normal situation. But in this kind of an externally imposed change, because of which I am just lying on a bed of arrows, none of those traditional things which I have done in the past would work. Does that mean I give up? No. Within these constraints, let me enumerate not what is not possible, but let me try to figure out using my intelligence what is possible. And so he analyzed himself and understood that the principle is hospitality must be expressed. That principle I must maintain. The second question is, how do I express that hospitality? Those details have changed due to circumstances. Within the current circumstances, at the most, I can offer only a few words of glorification and expression of my heart through my words of welcome. But within these constraints, if that is all that I can do, let me do that. And so Bhishma at that point expressed words of appreciation and glorification to Krishna and welcomed. And so it is said at that time that Tan Sametan Mahabhaga Upalabhya Vasuttama Pujayanasa Dharmagya Desha Kala Vibhagavit. As per time, place, and circumstance, Bhishma did not think what all I have done in the past. He did not think what all I could have done if circumstances were normal. He just understood that within these circumstances, I must not give up my hope to be able to serve within the constraints. And he offered hospitality with words. And in that horizontal state of being constrained in his body, in his limbs, in all of his physical senses, he realized Yudhishthir Maharaj, with all of his limbs functioning, all of his hands and legs free, is in a state of hopelessness. And me, my hands and legs are bound, and Krishna is expecting me to offer hope to the hopeless Yudhishthir. And so the famous Bhishma Parva in the Mahabharata comes, which has excellent directions in more than 250 chapters, which consist of instructions on leadership given by Bhishma at a time when the only limb which could function and move was his tongue. So the greatest leadership lessons in history, in our tradition and in our own country, was given by one of the greatest leaders, where he was under the constraints of an externally motivated change, externally imposed change. And therefore, Bhishma's instructions to Yudhishthir on Rajadharma, on Stri Dharma, on Moksha Dharma, all of these are studied by leadership experts throughout history. And therefore, this is the first principle, that motivation alone doesn't work on externally imposed change. We need the ability to interpret this change, and the interpretation basically translates into our ability to know what are the constraints I am under, what are the things which will work under these circumstances, and how I can continue to have hope that things will work in spite of these constraints. So the most important asset, I would say, where currently because of the lockdown, so many of our assets we seem to be losing, our money, our bottom line, our ability to function, our skills, all seem to be assets which have been totally paralyzed and locked down. But believe me, there is one asset all of us have in these current circumstances, which we need to nourish, to preserve, to grow, and that is the asset of hope. So the second is basically focused on that principle, that great leadership embraces both the real and the ideal. Sometimes there is a long debate or a extended prolonged debate which happens. There are those who are the pessimists. They see only the real. Then there are those who are the optimists. And the naive optimists see only the ideal. And an extended confrontation between the ideal and the real always happens. So the optimists and pessimists are many times at loggerheads. So even in the current lockdown situation, I am sure when each one of you, with your teams, with your top leadership teams, with your middle management, and with those on the ground are having debates, analysis on what exactly the situation, how do I interpret it, and what is the way forward. So you have to understand this intricacy between pessimism and optimism. And therefore, debating what is right and what is wrong is pointless. Moving towards the brutally real and the unrealistically ideal. Both these extremes must be given up, and currently, great leadership would embrace both the real and the ideal. I'll give an example of Jim Stockdale. So Jim Stockdale was a general in the American Army. He was commissioned in the Vietnam War, and in 1965 he was captured, and then he was jailed in the period of 1965 to 1973. And because he was such a high-ranking officer in the American, Army or Navy, he basically was subjected to very ruthless, brutal kind of torture. He was, imposed in solitary confinement, and practically everybody felt that the kind of torture he's going through, he will not survive. In fact, many of his colleagues were subjected to much lesser degree of torture compared to him. And then most people felt that Jim Stockdale will perish, many of his colleagues will survive, but exactly opposite happened. Many of his colleagues perished, and Jim Stockdale survived to tell the story. And then, when he was asked, how is it that in spite of so much of negativity and difficulty, you survived? How was it possible? So he said that actually the first people who died in that captivity in Vietnam were the optimists. And this came like a big shock to people. Doesn't seem to make sense, because the current paradigm is think positive, do positive, always think positive. If you think positive, everything will be all right. So he says, no. The problem with the optimists was they were so much obsessed with their positive thought that very soon things will improve. Very soon we will be released. This thought that things will improve and we will be released was so obsessively strong within their mind that when there was a delay in their being released, they died not because of torture, but they died because of broken, weak heart. And therefore, we must always continue to have the faith that ultimately we will prevail. But that must be tempered with the discipline and the ability to confront the most brutal reality, whatever that reality may be. And therefore, Ta Krishna Vahe Vasudeva Agate Swayam Vyavartanta Yatha Tamorate. If you go in the Bhagavad Puran, and practically most of you are from India, so you are aware of the story of Krishna Janam on Janmashtami, that Krishna appeared to Vasudeva and Devaki as their son, but after they had lost 6 sons. But what was Vasudeva's core strength? It is described that Tatascha Shauri Bhagavat Prachodita. Vasudeva is described as Shauri, brave. But what is the Bhagavatam's definition of brave? So from our Vedic tradition perspective, brave is not someone who conquers many battles. Brave is not someone who successfully kills others. Brave is not someone who goes and loots and brings money in and takes risks. As per the Bhagavat and the Gita, the definition of brave is, in spite of all kinds of losses and defeats, in spite of having his in spite of losing wealth, losing health, losing job, losing profits, losing money, losing assets and property, losing reputation, losing a relationship, in spite of losing all this, when a person refuses to lose hope, that person is defined as Shauri, Shurveer, Shaurya Pradarshan Karne Wale, one who actually demonstrates bravery. And therefore, Jim Stockdale, he shared that he survived because he had the ability to combine the ruthless honesty of the circumstance and situation which was facing him, along with never losing the faith that things will get better in the future. So this is the trick. You have to have a liberal and a very careful mix of both the optimism and pessimism. And so here, the opposite, this kind of situation is very important. And again, we find the example in the Mahabharata, when the entire battle was over, Duryodhana was hiding, and Krishna told Yudhishthira and others that Duryodhana is hiding in this Sampat Panchak lake below. Call him out. So when Duryodhana was called out, he started accusing Yudhishthira Maharaj of all kinds of malified intentions and using all kinds of wrong techniques to win that battle. And Yudhishthira, inspired by emotion, just said, okay, you pick up any one of us and fight, and we are fine. And Krishna became extremely upset. Without consulting, how could we make that promise? With great difficulty, we have reached till here. If Duryodhana picks up Nakula and Sahadev, that's the end of the story. We have to give the entire throne back to him. Thankfully, Duryodhana chose Bhima to fight. And when the battle was going on, Yudhishthira asked Krishna, I see that this battle is going on for days and days. Who is going to win? And Krishna said to Yudhishthira that, my dear Yudhishthira, just because I am here, don't just feel optimistic that Bhima will win. Understand the reality that in the last 12 years of Vanvas, Bhima could not practice on a regular basis fighting the Gada and the mace the way Duryodhana could practice daily. Again, Duryodhana has lost everything. His back is against the wall. He has nothing to lose, everything to gain. He is putting his 200% in this battle. For Bhima, he already has won and he has all of you with him. So there may be a touch of complacency in his fight. And plus, please remember that technique-wise, Duryodhana is much better than Bhima. Although Bhima is more powerful physically. So therefore, you have to be able to combine the liberal dose of optimism and realism and understand what will work best in this current situation. So great leadership embraces both the real and the ideal. The third sutra is, many times we are so much used to, doing things in a certain way. So one time I had given a lecture on the problems which successful people face. So all the people in the audience were very happy because just by the nature of the topic, we acknowledged everyone present to be successful. So one of the points I made in that lecture was, one of the problems we face is, successful people face is superstitious behavior. Sometimes there is a student who's smoking on a regular basis, and then he gets A grade during the semester. So when the next semester begins, he starts thinking that because I was smoking, therefore I got the A grade. So therefore, now, even if someone tells, give up smoking, there is no need for you to smoke. He says, oh, no, 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 actually, because I smoke, I get A grade, and therefore I will not change. So sometimes we are so much used to doing things in a certain way, and we correlate that with the main method by which we obtain success, that in the hope of success, we follow superstitious behavior and are unwilling to change the methods. So we have to be the first to change and not the last. And we must acknowledge here at this point of time, pause for a moment and acknowledge with gratitude the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, who actually was amongst the first in the world to show that yes, hard and tough decisions can be taken, and they need to be taken in the interest of people's lives and safety. And therefore, by God's grace and thanks to the effort put in by the entire government machinery and the medical support system, and those who are fighting right on the front lines in various capacities, we still have the situation much better compared to many other countries across the world. And that was all possible because the most difficult decision to make are those which you have to make when there is no other precedent. Because many times, even in our meetings, you must have experienced that when the call to vote comes, rather than voting, many people first look at others and see which way people are lifting their hands or voting. And many times people, they follow the social norm more than follow their conviction. And therefore, as leaders, we should have that conviction from within and know what is the time we need to actually make that change. ISKCON is still running a hospital called Bhakti Vedanta Hospital in Mira Road. And we went through a crisis situation way back in 2000, where, due to union, there was a strike, and then ultimately there was a lockout. And after that lockout, then there was a lot of debate on should we restart or not. And at that point, it was decided that yes, we have to restart, but we need to be the first one making the changes in the model of the hospital. So previously, it was a very, very energy and financial investment heavy hospital. They made the whole thing very lean. And when they reopened, it was with a totally different paradigm. Nobody told them to do that. Nobody expected them to do that. But they realized that unless we change instantly and positively, the change around is going to sweep us. And therefore, we need to be the first to adapt to the change and not the last. Then we have the fourth paradigm is lockdown situations as these are very important for us to introspect and go through our motives. Am I doing this business or this particular career only due to selfish reasons, or is there a feeling of sacrifice in what I'm doing? Have I accepted this particular situation? But am I in denial? In this particular situation, I'm supposed to be having faith. What do I do if I'm overcome and overwhelmed with fear? So we have to sift through our motives and then try to understand that we have to go from the lower motives to the higher motives. The Gita explains 3 modes of nature. The lowest mode is a mode of ignorance. The mode of ignorance creates panic, anxiety, hopelessness, depression. It is the mode of ignorance, technically called as tamo gun. The motivation to work in tamogun arises due to fear or bhaya. If I do not do this, this will happen. If I do not do this, this will happen. Higher than the mode of ignorance is the mode of passion. And the mode of passion, the motivation is due to desire or ichha. I will attain this position. I will get this benefit. I will get this profit. So it is desire which drives us. It is the mode of passion, ichha shakti. It is due to ichha. But then the mode of passion also takes you through ups and downs. Because once you are not benefiting, if you're not making money, then your motivation goes away because your ichha is affected. So as your ichha gets affected, your motivation gets affected. That is rajogun. You go through like a pendulum up and down. The third level as per Gita is what we must strive to achieve as a base minimum, which is mode of goodness or sattvagun. And the motivation in sattvagun is we serve out of a sense of duty. A child cries in the middle of the night, mother gets up, tries to take care of the child out of a sense of duty. And that duty leads to the next level, which is the level 4 of motivation, which is love. Service done without selfish consideration. So therefore, love is the highest motive, and we must try to attain that motive of service, where we have absolutely selfless desire to serve. We serve for the sake of serving. We serve for the sake of pleasing those whom we are serving. We put in our 100% effort in performing this activity, expecting nothing in return. And that's what Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. So when you act out of a sense of duty and out of sense of love, the external changes in circumstances does not affect you because you are not looking anything in return except an opportunity for you to serve, reciprocate, express gratitude. You are in a mode of giving, not taking. And in that mode of giving, you experience freedom from anxiety. And at the same time, that doesn't mean that one becomes useless and helpless. Arjuna fought that battle. Hanuman fought that battle with the topmost motivation of love and selfless service. And they are the greatest exemplars of how to be fully efficient, effective, and at the same time be successful in what we are trying to do. And fifth is process your emotion as you help others process theirs. Currently, people are in shock. They are in denial. They are in mourning. They are very much afflicted. And therefore, you have to be able to, first of all, take time out for yourself and process your own emotions. And you have to look at yourself on a platform of truth, on a platform of stability. And then you move forward and help others also. And therefore, this is a good time. You have lost on sleep in the past. You have lost on regular schedule in the past. You have lost on proper exercise in the past due to various busy schedules. So I'm also in the same category that for the first time in the last 27 years, I'm experiencing a period of high quality rest, solitude, introspection, ability to do something creative, think about the future, to do things which are not urgent but extremely important. And therefore, it is time for us to get out of the ultra urgency mode and work on things which can actually help us remain grounded in this kind of a situation. And therefore, we have to process our emotion as we help others process theirs.
Prabhuji, we have lost your voice and video both. Prabhuji, we have lost your video and voice both.
Sir, I'm in connect with the tech team, sir, coordinating with them.
Is that you are able to actually ignite the inferno of hope within. And once you are filled with hope and optimism, you can help others connect with that hope. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So over to you, Sapanji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
you.
Now I think it's time for some questions. I request the audience to please post their questions in the question box. In the meanwhile, I'll put the first question from Mr. Akhilesh Khandelwal. He says everyone is telling to be optimistic in this situation, but you told to balance it with realism. But accepting realism is difficult in this situation. Kindly guide us.
Yeah. In the Gita, Krishna says, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karvani sarvasha ahankara vimulatma kartaham iti manyate. That a sober person sees that I am under control. If I do not eat, I cannot survive. I depend on food, I depend on air. I get diseased, it is beyond my control. Death comes, it is beyond my control. So the Gita explains that a sober person is aware of the reality that I am under control. An intoxicated person who is actually having, liquor, and after drinking liquor, he is in that state of intoxication. He starts thinking, I am supreme, I am in control. And in that kind of a intoxicated state, it becomes very difficult for him to accept and see even the reality. And therefore, this is time for the entire society to relook at how we want to live our life. It is a time for reset button. Should we continue exploiting our resources? Should we continue exploiting animals? Should we continue exploiting, the entire nature and the globe the way we have been doing so far? If we continue doing it, in spite of such stupendous technological advancement over the last 10 years, what the last 10 years have achieved in terms of technology is something which is mind-boggling. But less than 1 gram weight of the net virus, it has put a brake on everything. And therefore, it is a time for us to realize that yes, we may have the best ideas, we may have the best brains amongst all other species, but we really need to become humble and realize that if we exploit the privilege which has been given to us as human beings, then there will be a reaction which will come in some other form, and we'll have to pay a tax for that. And therefore, this is a message for the entire humanity, a wake-up call on which way we want to go in terms of our personal life's choices. So therefore, I think we have to combine both optimism and realism.
Thank you, Prabhuji. That was indeed very beautifully explained by you. Thank you so much. Some of our viewers have expressed that the fifth principle, they had lost connection and they could not get it properly. So can you again briefly go through the fifth? The fifth sutra.
Yeah. Fifth sutra is your emotions as you process of those who may be your colleagues, who may be reporting to you, whom you may be reporting to. So here we are dealing with two sets of emotions. One is your own, second is others with whom you have a relationship. As you know that just like in an orchestra, when one violin plays, there is some sound. But when 100 violins play, the whole music is amplified. Similarly, you may be in anxiety. That's one violin playing. But your wife is in anxiety, your kids are in anxiety, your boss is in anxiety, your employees are in anxiety. And the cumulative effect of that anxiety, it makes you feel more hopeless and helpless. So therefore, yes, we are facing an extraordinarily challenging situation. There is no disputing that fact. But you have to be able to be clear-headed in understanding what are the things I can do within these situations. When I see my wealth lost, I feel sad. When I see my wealth not coming back over the next 1 or 2 years, I feel sad. So you process your emotion. Yes, I'm feeling that sadness, that pain. And then you feel also the emotions and, the pain of others. And therefore, you don't have to be in denial. You have to accept that. You have to process that. But at the same time, you should also try to see that as I'm losing money, maybe it is a good time for me to gain my sleep, which I had lost before in the pursuit of money. Maybe it is a great time for me to gain on my health, which I had lost in the pursuit of money. Maybe it is a great time for me to gain my relationships with my family members, whom I had lost touch with in my pursuit of making money. And so as the circumstances of lockdown is curtailing my so many other activities, let me not just get obsessed with what I am losing and lose hope, but immediately switch channels and find out that yes, I can do certain things, and this is actually a very bad time for certain things, but on the other hand, what are the great things which can be done in this circumstance? So therefore, you have to be able to quickly switch your emotions and do what you can to salvage the situation. And as they say, make the best use of a bad bargain. Take a sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prapuji. We have a couple of more questions here. The next one is from Kirti Somani ji. He is asking, in these difficult times, how can we handle rejection and frustration?
Very important question. First of all, it's a reality of society that the entire society is based on the paradigm of only the successful people get accepted and the failures get rejected. That itself is a very questionable paradigm, but somehow that is a paradigm which has come to be accepted today. And therefore, when people go through failure, their biggest fear is not the fear of failure itself, but the bigger fear than the failure is the social reprisal, the social challenges which come along with it, the reactions of society. And therefore, our amygdala within our brain, it immediately becomes activated and we start experiencing panic attacks due to fear of rejection. So please try to understand that this is a situation which has not been created by you, by me, by anyone in our neighborhood. It has come upon us due to circumstances beyond our control. And therefore, at least now let us acknowledge that there are powers beyond our control and we just can't live life as if we are the dawn here and as if we are in full control of the whole planet. We have to take this opportunity to bend our head down and acknowledge the realities of nature and realize the need to respect certain basic norms of nature. And therefore, we have tried to live life rejecting nature. And so nature is hitting back and saying, you try to reject me, now I will put you in a situation where you will be rejected. And therefore, with all of our sophisticated systems and technology across, just see what it takes to humble an entire human society. What it has taken to humble an entire human society with its massive infrastructure, with its massive armaments, stockpiles of nuclear arsenal, with its massive rapid advancement in technology. What have we not achieved? Everything has been brought to a standstill. Brake has been applied by a very, very insignificant parasite. And therefore, we should realize that yes, this is a time for us to be sensitive to others. That in future, I will be more respectful in my dealings with others, more respectful towards nature, more respectful in not wasting things, understanding the value of things. Many times parents have to drill children, don't waste green leafy vegetables, don't waste milk, don't waste this, that. Now in this lockdown period, every family is realizing the value of what a few kilos of vegetable mean. Because just to go out and fetch vegetables is such a challenge in this situation that in future, your appreciation for these basic things which we took for granted before, it has grown considerably. And therefore, let us understand that the entire society is under siege. You or me are not the only people facing it. What will give us hope is connecting with others also and seeing how those in a hopeless situation have a consciousness which is full of hope. Connecting with them will ignite hope within you. If you keep talking with people who have lost hope and they are also trying to make you hopeless, in that association, that wave of hopelessness will afflict you. So therefore, choose your association and connections wisely in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Very beautifully explained. Such a small virus has brought everyone to the entire humanity on its knees. And the lessons which you just told are really the beautiful lessons if we can imbibe them and if we can realize them. So thank you for that nice answer, sir. I think we have time for one more question. I think we'll wrap up with that. So this question is from Mr. Bhusri. He is asking how to bring consistency in our nature for work, relationship, and all other things.
Very important point. For consistency, the important word is start. For example, if you have decided I will lose weight. So if you have decided today, then tomorrow you start. Okay. So the most important step in living a life of consistency is the first step. So tomorrow you may walk 10 steps only, but you have overcome the inertia of not doing anything for 20 years. Then the day after that, you say that I will increase by 1%. So I will take 11 steps. So when you tell the mind, I will take 11 steps, the mind doesn't react. Because the mind thinks, "Arey, kya 10 kadam chale, to 11 kadam mein kaun badi baat?" So you have to gradually lead the mind through small size bites which the mind can handle. The problem we make is the first day you walk 10 steps, then you think, "Agle din main marathon bhagunga." And then next day you try 40 kilometers. You can't even go for half a mile. And then you start thinking, I lost it. So therefore, the secret to consistency is take as many steps which you can on a daily basis, which makes you feel accomplished, fulfilled. Sense of completion and success is there. It may be small, but small doesn't matter. It is important that you do it every day. In fact, as a matter of fact, I want to share with you that when I was in IIT in 1990, I used to go for jogging every day. And so during this lockdown, I'm in this eco village, and we have 100 acres, and we have an excellent place where the horses, they go for a run. So every evening from 5:30 to 6:15, I have started going for a jog, which I'm doing after 1990, so after 30 years. So, if this is the situation, then you try what you can under your constraints. But the important thing for consistency is you begin and you make manageable increments, feel sense of accomplishment and fulfillment, and then gradually keep making increments. So gradual increment is more important than instant growth. It is the instinct towards instant growth which kills our consistency. And therefore keep doing gradually, and before you realize it's part of your habit. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So nicely explained. I think instant gratification is always bad, and most of us try to do that when we are taking up some tasks. So I think if we consistently take baby steps and achieve success and go forward, as you explained, I'm sure this consistency will come in whatever is our endeavor. Right, sir?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Perfect.
I think, sir, there's a very interesting question. So I'm taking the liberty to ask you one more question.
Okay,
it is from Mr. S. Ramakrishnan. He says, can we overcome the uneasiness and restlessness at these times through spirituality? Please tell us what we can do.
Definitely. The entire concept and paradigm of spirituality was spoken by Krishna to Arjuna to help him realize two things: his identity and his purpose. So the sum and substance of spirituality for all the hearers right now, if you want to understand what is spirituality in just two words, it is connecting with your identity, and number two, connecting with your purpose. And therefore, Bhagavad Gita very much helps. In fact, on my Facebook page, Gauranga Das Official, I have started uploading a series of videos on Bhagavad Gita, chapter-wise. And it is only 6 minutes per chapter. And it is in the form of acronyms. So in fact, the chapter 1 is, the episode is called Doubt as a Game Changer. And, this series is received very well by people, because many of the people, especially in India, always wanted to understand Gita. So if you follow this series on the Bhagavad Gita, already I have uploaded 3 chapters, and then every 3 days I am uploading 1 chapter, first in English, after 3 days in Hindi, and the next chapter. So therefore, spirituality is very, very powerful in these kind of situations. Bhagavad Gita is a book which helps you connect with your identity, understand your purpose, and multiple paths are given within that. And therefore, I think that, I would encourage people to take time out, spend an hour or so in introspection and reflection. It is a time for going deeper into philosophy, understanding the existential questions. And I would definitely encourage you to go in that direction. You can also do some yoga on a regular basis and pranayam to help control your mind and your breath, because breath is control to the mind and mind is control to the breath. That is also a very powerful paradigm. So these are some of my thoughts. Thank you.
Very beautifully explained, Prabhuji. I'd never heard this definition of spirituality earlier, that it is a connection with your purpose and your inner self, right?
Identity.
Identity, right. So that was really beautifully explained by you. So I think now it's time to wrap up this webinar. We would have loved to hear you more, but I guess
Sure, sure.
we'll again call you for the next webinar.
Definitely.
On behalf of the Indore Management Association, I take this opportunity to extend our wholehearted thanks to Gauranga Prabhuji for sparing his precious time today for IMA and giving us the amazing 5 sutras, which I am sure would help each one of us to cope up with this externally imposed change, which has taken each one of us by a surprise, and that too a nasty one. So thank you, Gauranga Prabhuji, for guiding us
Thank you.
today with your spiritual wisdom from our scriptures like Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita to tide over this highly turbulent times with confidence and with poise. I'm
Thank you, sir.
sure we at IMA shall continue to get your patronage in the times to come. We would always love to bring you back to our audience. Thank you so much,
Thank you
sir.
so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Pranam.
It was a pleasure.